Square Enix admits Final Fantasy 16 and 7 Rebirth profits did not meet our expectations. Square Enix has finally made public its dissatisfaction with Final Fantasy 16 and Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth's commercial performance, admitting neither game met profit expectations. In a financial results briefing held May 13th, but only released today, September 18th, Takahashi Kiryu, president and representative director of Square Enix, said, quote, "In the HD Games subsegment, we released multiple new titles, including major titles such as Final Fantasy 16 and Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth, but profits unfortunately did not meet our expectations," end quote. Kiryu went on to suggest that Square Enix's cancellation cannibalized sales of its Final Fantasy games released during the financial year ending March 2024. Quote, "We recognize that the issues remain in the digital entertainment segment," Kiryu admitted. "The HD Games subsegment failed to better its profitability, posting operating losses in every year of our previous medium-term plan. In addition to this, we did not manage our title portfolio across the company as well as we could have, which I believe resulted in opportunity losses due to cannibalization between our own titles," end quote. Square Enix released Final Fantasy 16 in June 2023, and 7 Rebirth just over half a year later in February 2024. Final Fantasy 16 and 7 Rebirth both launched as PlayStation 5 exclusives, and whilst Square Enix has announced a better sales figure for Final Fantasy 16, it is yet to do so for Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth, the second game in the company's trilogy of Final Fantasy 7 remakes. The company has already announced a significant rework of its business as it fights for profitability. It has a new multi-platform plan that encompasses PC and potentially Xbox and the next Nintendo console, but it also canceled a number of games, and Kiryu revealed taken steps to better curtail its pipeline of games. Quote, "In the case of the HD Games subsegment, sales of individual games will remain the key variable. But we believe that we will also be able to exercise some degree of control over that volatility by carefully curating our pipeline over the next 3 years," Kiryu said. "By also working steadily to improve our profitability, we intend to offset the weakness in SD games to achieve overall profitability," end quote. This sounded like a load of horse shit. What the fuck was he saying? I've read these things where they're like, "Hey, we didn't make the sales didn't make sense," whatnot. Have you ever recalled us talking about a segment that would talk about HD Games subsegment? The volatility by carefully curating
You're gonna get mad about this guy talking like he's still in 2003, but you're not gonna get mad at Nintendo possibly ruining game development for all time.
Yeah, because it makes no fucking sense. And this is, again, the thing they've done over and over and over again. What? You see, Tavin is talking about...
I don't know what to do with you anymore.
Dude, here's the problem.
What are you talking about?
Again, I'll say it again. The whole thing with the lawsuit is just... it hasn't gone anywhere yet. We do not know. You'll get my outrage when it does start doing things.
But you're mad at this guy for just talking like he's in 2003.
Because that's the exact same thing. You said 2003. We've heard this like every year from Square Enix about
he's
whatever
talking about,
game
he's talking about HD game subsegment shit. That's 2003 talk. We're well past the era of HD game subset. Like, that's what he's talking about. That's why it's weird. Is because he's talking about games like it's still a transfer from SD to HD. And we are damn near 2 decades past that part.
Which is why it leads into the greater conversation of, you said we're going to rehash what we've said before. What exactly are you expecting?
To get into the meat of that conversation, what were you expecting in terms of sales figures?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah, so I have a lot of thoughts about that.
Mm-hmm.
I think platform exclusivity was a mistake. But I think this is the effects of Final Fantasy as a brand being on a decline for a long time prior to the Final Fantasy VII Remake series. I think the problem is that Final Fantasy has not been serving its fan base. You look to 13 being divisive amongst the community. You look at 14 obviously not launching well at all, and then, rebounding and making its way back, and then obviously becoming super popular and profitable in that sense. But not what the fan base is there for. So there is a difference between a Final Fantasy fan and a Final Fantasy 14 fan. And then 15, meh, right? Like, kind of worked, kind of didn't. And then
not a complete game.
Yeah, and then 16 diverting even more from the formula that Final Fantasy made its bread and butter on. 7 Remake series, I think, is kind of working its way back to that. I think that's the combat system Final Fantasy should be known for the next, 2 decades. And but now you're in this tricky spot of it's a remake series coming out in multiple parts. There are people waiting for all parts to be out before they even touch the game. And on top of that, I imagine each like subsequent part are going to get less and less sales as they go on because they are so interconnected with each other and they're taking forever to come out. That's the tricky part there, right? So, and on top of that, you're limited to one platform for at least the first year. And Square Enix, as a publisher, has been putting out, outside of Final Fantasy games, a bunch of dog shit. Like Forspoken, The Blind Man, whatever the fuck that game was called. The list goes on and on. It's just been a bunch of dog shit. Final Fantasy, Stranger Origins, Stranger of Paradise. I understand you liked that game, and from people who played it, they said it was a lot of fun. But from the outside, that game looked like dog shit. And I think that's the perception of that game, is that it was kind of crappy or whatever. But again, that's another example of Final Fantasy is not serving its fan base. That's a different style of game than what Final Fantasy fans want.
I think a lot of the core comes from, particularly with 16 and 15. 7, like Rebirth, it's kind of weird, especially because we don't know the sales numbers of things.
Yep.
And it is built off of Final Fantasy 7, which is going to be,
And quite frankly, when Remake came out, there was more PlayStation 4s out than there are PlayStation 5s out right now.
Exactly, yeah.
So, yeah, Rebirth is going to have less sales than Remake.
But I get it. It is connected to them, going away from their base, particularly in building very action-heavy, third-person kind of like, God of War /
Square Enix,
Devil May Cry.
You're not good at those. Don't make them. You know what you're good at? RPGs. You're real fucking good at those. Make those.
Yeah.
Make more of those.
So I think it's just a course correction on, like you said, the 7 Rebirth and Remake combat system.
Yeah.
And that RPG-focused gameplay that Final Fantasy is more known for. This spell of trying to do the action-adventure type RPGs, well, Final Fantasy is turning away from the RPG-heavy elements, I think is just not going to work for future games. I remember, I definitely, you said it, definitely. I think I did as well. I echoed it about how 16 is kind of like the last bit of like, okay, you did your action game. Don't do those anymore.
Yeah, stop that.
Yeah, you're good.
Stop that.
Yeah,
so I think the response to Expedition 33, I forget the first part of that title. I just know the subtitle is Expedition 33. I think a lot of people are going to be looking at that game and seeing how well that does and how it's received. And I do think that will drastically affect the future of Final Fantasy. Yep. Depending on how that one is received. The simple fact of the matter to me is, I don't know if turn-based combat needs to come back, but it definitely needs to return to roots of heavy RPG elements. Like, the Remake series kind of like walks the line between like turn-based RPGs and action games in a very clever way. And I personally, I think every RPG should be like that because it's fucking perfect. And so, yeah, but I understand that gets tricky. I think it's going to be a long time before you see a Final Fantasy 17.
Yeah, I could see that being the case. Not really wanting to, jump right into it when clearly they're not satisfied with the sales going on right now.
I also think we get the final part of FF7 very fast. I think that turnaround time is going to be a lot faster than either of the last 2 games. I would expect, when is the 30th anniversary? It's in like 27, right?
I think
26,
so.
27, something like that. Yeah, I think it's 27. I think that's when we see the final part of that. And
it will be 27.
Yeah, and then I think they wrap that up very quickly. I mean, and if you think about it, the world's already made. The world is there. The combat system's there. The rest is just content now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so we have to repopulate the world with content, and we have to figure out some of the trickier parts of Final Fantasy VII. Slight spoilers. We have to figure out going underwater and flying and maybe going to space? Question mark?
See, space is only like a small set. Well, they might expound on. I don't know.
Connor, they took one screen
yeah.
from the original game and made a 30-minute, and made like an hour and a half set piece out of it. So, like, like that's listen. If I can't go to the moon,
to your turn, like saying they're going to turn around the game, the third one quickly. I think because of the reasons you just outlined, that might not happen, especially due to the fact that who's heading that game. It's big heads at Square Enix, who have a lot of weight.
It's the mix of the old guard plus the new generation that's kind of taken over the reins over the last 10 years.
Yeah. So, but beyond just what they're going to do with Rebirth, definitely time to do something different with Final Fantasy or try and make more core strong games. Because, again, you pointed it out, Forspoken sucked ass. Maybe over. Probably sucked ass. Didn't they make Ball and Underland? What the fuck?
They may have published it, but it wasn't a Square Enix
Something weird
specific
with
studio.
that.
Yeah, that was an indie studio, but they were like a spin off of somebody else. I don't remember. There was that one that like really flopped.
Babylon's Fall?
That's it.
Yeah,
that one flopped real hard. So yeah, like Square Enix, you just have a reputation of like not producing the most quality games and not serving your fan base. So yeah you're gonna have money troubles at that rate. And on top of that, your biggest games are exclusive to one platform.
And we don't know if they're actually failing to meet like whatever expectations they're setting.
You could still make profit. They're still making profit. They're just not making enough profit, whatever that means,
And we know that companies are greedy and they want to always make as much as they can.
Of course. Well, you always want to do better on the next one than you did on the last one. But yeah, I think they've made the mistake of trying to diversify their portfolio. I think they need to be known for things. Capcom, I think, is the other publisher that you would compare to Square Enix, I would assume, right?
Yeah, definitely.
That makes sense to everybody, right? You don't compare Square Enix to Nintendo. You would maybe to like a Ubisoft, but like the next one over is Capcom from Square, right? Mm-hmm. And Capcom is known for what? Resident Evil, Street Fighter, Monster Hunter, Devil May Cry. But, the other three more so than Devil May Cry. And I do believe we are getting a DMC 6 at some point. But Resident Evil, Street Fighter, Monster Hunter. Those are the big three. And those three have been serving the fuck out of their audiences for the last almost 10 years now. And that's why Capcom has had a full rebound. Is they did the same thing, right? They tried to turn Resident Evil into an action franchise. I mean, they did turn Resident Evil into an action franchise. Kind of worked for a little bit, but overall, you saw reception kind of fade more and more away, and the quality of the games suffer. So then, when they returned to survival horror, boom, big impact. We are so back. Here's Devil May Cry 5. Here's a great Monster Hunter. Here's we're fixing Street Fighter 5, and then guess what? Street Fighter 6. Boom, another banger game, and you just kind of continue down that trope. Square Enix needs to take notes from what Capcom is doing right now.
Will they though? I don't know.
Should. I hope they do. No, and this is why I think Expedition 33 being having the same lead as Final Fantasy 16 with Ben Starr as your main guy. On top of that, it's had a lot of really great looks. It looks really, really good and really pretty. I think after the successes of games like Persona 5, and it's another example.
Persona 3 Reload, too.
Persona 3 Reload, as well, we assume is successful. I haven't seen any numbers on that one, but I assume it was. I assume it did well, not as well as 5.
A remake,
Right? Yeah, and it didn't. Yeah, but I also don't think Sega was betting all their chips on that. And then also Yakuza turning into Like a Dragon in a turn-based thing and finding it seems like pretty good success with that. I don't see anybody being mad at the direction Like a Dragon has gone. Certainly people want the action games to kind of come back, but
yeah. I mean, I think they're doing the pirate game. They're covering their bases.
That's such a genius idea. This character has an eye patch. We're going to do the memory loss thing. Oh shit! What would a guy with an eye patch think if he lost all his memories?
I don't know.
I must be a pirate, Like, that's fucking genius. Also, have you seen the gameplay of that?
Looks fun.
Shit looks good.
Yeah.
Like, it looks good. And I'm like, oh, fuck.
Apparently, it's similar to Gaiden, the one that takes place in Japan. You play as Kiryu, but not Kiryu. It was the samurai one that came out recently.
You're talking Ishin.
Ishin, yes. Ishin.
But also the man who erased his name.
Yeah.
Which wasn't received as well because it was a much smaller project. This seems to be also a small project.
Yeah, it's that they're basing it, I remember, off Ishin combat, but making it better. That was like their core.
Okay. So I didn't play any of those, so I don't know.
Neither did I. Apparently, it wasn't obviously the best, even in terms of the action, but I heard it wasn't bad.
Yeah.
Or,
Infinite Wealth's
left a
pretty
bad
good.
taste in your mouth. Yeah.
I want to play more. I don't know if I'll have time to. I want to finish Persona. That's the thing. I like Persona. We're just yapping now.
Yeah. We're going to yap more.
Yeah, we are. Connor, I mean, they've already put plans in motion to change how they do things, right? They're going to trim down the portfolio. Back to Square Enix, I mean. They're going to trim down the portfolio. They're going to focus on their major IPs. And you assume we're going to see a return to form in terms of genre? Do you think they go more of a 7 remake route, or do they kind of bring turn-based back?
It seems like they might be going with the more combat-oriented route because their other game, Metaphor ReFantazio, has a mixture of those two things. And it has...
That's a Sega game, isn't it?
I thought it was Atlas.
Because it's from the... Yeah, Atlas is owned by Sega.
No, they're almost...
No, because Persona is Sega.
Hmm.
And also, that game's turn-based, isn't it?
It is, but it also has, like, a mix of action. Like, you're going to go around and fight like a normal person. Like a normal action.
Like in the way that, like, a
character.
Persona does?
No, like, it was different. It had, like, more in-depth action. But it was for, like... I don't know how it's going to work with how you progress through levels, but I think I remember reading somewhere...
I feel like that game's going to sneak up on me, because I'm definitely going to try it, but I feel like I'm going to be like, oh, shit, I love this. And I had no... Like, it's just a blind spot. I'm like... In my head, I just go, oh, yeah, that game's there. You know?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not, like, excited for that game. I'm going to play it, but I'm not, like, excited for it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I wasn't excited for it, but then Yoko Taro, he's been doing... He even commented it himself. He's like, I don't know why they're coming to me for this, but he's been, like, doing previews of how he feels about the game. And apparently he, like, loves it. So, you know, he knows games.
We'll find out.
Yeah, we will. I'll find out.